The trial chamber hummed with ancient energy as Marcus Chen stepped through the crystalline archway. Behind him, the assembled representatives of 47 galactic civilizations watched in silence. Some bore expressions of curiosity, others of contempt, but most simply stared with the cold calculation of beings who had already decided his fate. The Valdari Consortium had issued the challenge 3 cycles ago. Any species claiming membership in the Galactic Council must prove their worth through the trial of echoes. It was an ancient rite, older than most civilizations, designed to test not just physical capability, but the very essence of what made a species worthy of standing among the stars. Humanity had been denied council membership for over 2 centuries. Too young, they said, too violent, too unpredictable. But when the trial was announced, Earth's representatives had requested participation, knowing it was their only path forward. Marcus had volunteered immediately. At 32, he was neither the strongest nor the smartest human alive, but he possessed something the council members struggled to understand: an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The chamber sealed behind him with a sound like distant thunder. Immediately, the walls began to shift, reality bending as the trial initiated its first phase. The air shimmered, and Marcus found himself standing on a barren plain beneath twin crimson suns. In the distance, a massive fortress loomed, its spires reaching toward the blood-red sky. "The trial of strength," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Defeat the Guardian." The ground trembled as something emerged from the fortress. It stood 3 meters tall, its crystalline body refracting the alien sunlight into 1,000 deadly rainbows. The Guardian's limbs moved with mechanical precision, each step leaving deep impressions in the hardened earth. Marcus had studied the recordings. No challenger had ever defeated the Guardian through brute force. The Krotak Empire's greatest warrior had been crushed in seconds. The ethereal collective's champion had lasted longer, but ultimately fallen to the creature's relentless assault. But Marcus didn't charge forward. Instead, he observed. The Guardian's movements followed patterns, efficient, logical, but predictable. It was designed to counter conventional attacks, to overwhelm with superior strength and speed. Humans, however, had never been conventional. Marcus began to run, not toward the Guardian but parallel to it, forcing the creature to turn and adjust. He picked up rocks, hurling them not at the Guardian but at the ground around its feet, creating dust clouds and unstable footing. When the Guardian lunged, Marcus was already moving, using the creature's own momentum against it. For 20 minutes he danced around the mechanical giant, never engaging directly, always staying just out of reach. The Guardian's movements became increasingly erratic as its programming struggled to adapt to an opponent who refused to fight by established rules. Finally, Marcus saw his opening. As the Guardian raised both arms for a devastating downward strike, he sprinted directly beneath it, placing a small explosive charge, standard human mining equipment, against its central power core. The blast wasn't powerful enough to destroy the Guardian, but it disrupted its energy matrix just long enough for the massive creature to topple backward, its systems failing. The scene dissolved, replaced by a new environment. A vast library with shelves stretching infinitely upward, filled with tomes containing the accumulated knowledge of dead civilizations. "The trial of wisdom," the voice announced. "Solve the paradox of infinite knowledge." A holographic puzzle materialized before Marcus, a complex equation that had supposedly stumped the greatest minds in galactic history. Mathematical concepts from dozens of species intertwined in patterns that seemed to defy logic itself. Marcus stared at the equation for exactly 30 seconds before walking past it entirely. Instead, he approached one of the lower shelves and selected a simple children's book from an extinct species called the Melodians. The book told the story of a young creature who couldn't solve a complex puzzle until she realized she was asking the wrong question. He returned to the holographic display and, instead of attempting to solve the equation, simply asked, "What if the paradox exists not to be solved, but to teach us that some knowledge is meant to remain infinite?" The equation dissolved, and for the first time in recorded trial history, the voice seemed surprised. "Acceptable." The final phase materialized around him, a void filled with the ghostly forms of every challenger who had failed the trial. Thousands of them, representing species that had been deemed unworthy and cast out from galactic society. "The trial of will," the voice announced. "Face the weight of failure and choose your path." The spectral forms pressed closer, their voices whispering tales of defeat, of civilizations that had been broken by rejection, of dreams that had withered in the darkness between stars. They promised Marcus that failure was inevitable, that humanity would join them in this limbo of the unworthy. But Marcus had grown up hearing stories of human failure, of expeditions that had ended in disaster, of colonies that had been lost, of wars that had cost millions of lives. Humanity's history was written in setbacks and defeats, yet somehow, impossibly, they had continued to reach for the stars. "You're right," he said to the ghostly figures. "Failure is part of who we are, but so is getting back up." He began to walk forward, and the spectral forms parted before him, not because he had overpowered them, but because he had acknowledged them. In accepting failure as part of the human experience, he had robbed it of its power to paralyze. The void shattered like glass, and Marcus found himself back in the trial chamber, facing the assembled council representatives. But something had changed. Where before he had seen calculation and dismissal, now he saw something else entirely. Uncertainty. The Valdari Consortium's chief representative, a being of pure energy contained within a geometric shell, spoke first. The human has completed the trial, but his methods were unprecedented. "He didn't defeat the Guardian," observed the Krotak military attaché. "He outlasted it." "He ignored the paradox entirely," added the scholarly delegate from the ethereal collective. "And he embraced failure rather than conquering it," whispered the hive-mind representative of the Zephyrian Union. Marcus stood in the center of the chamber as debates erupted around him. Some called for his disqualification, arguing that his unconventional approaches invalidated the trial's results. Others demanded to know how a species so young could demonstrate such adaptive thinking. But it was the oldest voice in the chamber that silenced all others. The Ancient One, a being so old that its species name had been forgotten, spoke in harmonics that translated directly into understanding. For 10 million years, species have attempted these trials using strength, intelligence, and will as we understand them. This human has shown us that there are other ways to be strong, other forms of wisdom, other expressions of will. The question is not whether humanity deserves a place among us. The question is whether we are prepared for what they will become. The vote was unanimous, but not in the way anyone expected. Humanity was granted immediate council membership, but with a caveat that had never been applied before: mandatory observation protocols. Every human diplomatic mission would be monitored. Every human colony expansion would be tracked. Every human innovation would be studied. As Marcus left the chamber, he carried with him the weight of his species' future. But he also carried something else: the dawning realization among the galaxy's elder races that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their ability to win, but in their refusal to accept that any loss was permanent. Behind him in the council chambers, the real work began, preparing the galaxy for a species that had just proven that the impossible was merely another word for not yet attempted. The trial was over. The true test was just beginning.